Visual Studio is likely to be an Azure developer's primary interface for the development and management of Azure resources. This is especially the case for those developers creating solutions on Microsoft technology stack like Windows.net and so on. Developers using Linux or Mac systems will focus primarily on the Azure CLI. Any developer or IT professional can use either of the Azure Management Portal tools. So in order to install the Azure SDK, first you need to make sure you have Microsoft Visual Studio installed and running on your computer. So you can simply go to visualstudio.microsoft.com in order to download your free version or paid version depending on your situation. In this case, I'm going to take you to the downloads page over here. As you can see, you can download the community version, which is free for students, which is good for you guys who are starting to learn. It is only asking you for a .edu account, or actually the thing that you can do is you can get the open source. If you're not a student, you can get the Visual Studio Code, which is a free download and open source. Whether of these two you download, it's going to help and it's going to work with the Azure SDK. So again, you need to be at visualstudio.microsoft.com/downloads in order to get your desired version of Visual Studio. So for example, for the sake of your thing in this class, I'm going to get the free download for the community version. And when you get here, you're going to be given an executable file. Just go ahead and register if you want to receive any tips or tricks, and then follow the instructions for the executable file. Since I already have a license to Microsoft Visual Studio 2017, I'm using that for demo purposes on this video. There's not really a big difference or actually any difference between how to install SDK over 2017 or 2019 version. So the choice is yours. Go with the version that you are more comfortable with. So after you finalize the installation steps with the executable file, go ahead and open up your Visual Studio. In this case, I'm running my Visual Studio 2017 for the first time, so I can show you the steps you have to take. So on the first screen, the welcome note is actually asking you to sign in with your Microsoft account. Usually when you have a development team, it helps a lot because through those accounts you can collaborate and you can have same access to the repositories and so on. But anyway, in this case, I'll just say no, not now, maybe later, and it's going to bring me down to choosing which format I want for my Visual Studio environment. That's absolutely your choice. In my sense, I like to have the dark because it's much easier on the eyes, at least my eyes, when I'm working with it for a long time. Then I click Start Visual Studio, and Visual Studio is going to prepare every single file that is needed to work on my system. Remember, it's going to take a little bit before it actually comes up. It depends on your computer and the power of your computer, and you're going to land in this place. Okay. So at this point, you have your Visual Studio up and running and ready to go. And you can start developing projects and anything. Next step is going to be adding the Azure SDK. So as an Azure developer, one of the first things you will want to do right after installing Visual Studio is install the Microsoft Azure SDK for .NET or any other language that you're using. You can obtain the Azure SDK from the Azure download page at azure.microsoft.com/download. So let's kind of like put this guy over here, and I want to go and open up the azure.microsoft.com download over there so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So we're done with the Visual Studio, so I'm going to get rid of this page right now. And over here, when I go, remember, the address here is azure.microsoft.com/downloads. So getting over there, and let me just put the notepad up so you guys can actually see the address that I'm at right now. This is where I am. And over here, I can simply choose which extension of SDK or software development kit that I want for which environment, and that's pretty much as easy as that. In this case, I have Visual Studio 2017. As you can see, you can always go to the help and see which version of Visual Studio you're using. And there we go. This is the architecture that I have over here. As you can see, my .NET versions are all 2017. So what I need to download is Visual Studio 2017 SDK for the .NET. Remember, if you are downloading the latest version, which is 2019, that's the way to go. So simply click over there, and it's gonna start downloading for me. And now, as you can see, I have the Visual Studio community, blah, blah, blah. So clicking on this, going over there, and now I have the Visual Studio installer coming up for me. Look at that. It says, before you get started, we need to set up a few things that you can configure your installation. Of course, you always have to say yes to this and move from there. There's no other option, as you can notice. Let's go and continue. While it is downloading and fetching my files, let me bring you back here to the downloads and the Visual Studio page over here. And I strongly recommend you to bookmark this guy because you will come back to this page often because this is the source for various language SDKs, Java, PHP, Ruby, and so on. And as you can see, the Python part is over here, the Go part is over there, and all that. So it's always good to have this page bookmarked so in future you can easily come back here. Now that I have my installer ready, as you can see, it is giving me options that I can add or remove from my Visual Studio. Which from this page, as you can see, I have a list of what is included in this installation. And the Azure development is actually right here. So it's giving me the .NET Framework 4.61, the .NET Core 2.1 for development tools, ASP.NET on Web, and container development tools. Also, if you look at this place, you see the Azure development and SDKs are already checked to be added. So the other options that you look at right now are the options that Visual Studio 2017 Enterprise is giving me the option to have it installed. And these two are the ones that I already download from the portal. So let's have these two checked. I would love to add C++2 to this installation, and it's going to add more options for me. And it depends on you, depending on which language you're working on. Let's say if you're doing Python development, oh yeah, let's do that. Python development, we want that too. And the rest of them. Remember, because this is the first run of the Visual Studio, I'm getting the option to add anything that I want because nothing is basically connected to this Visual Studio at this point, and this Visual Studio is kind of like naked. Usually C++, Python, and the rest of them are already installed over there because you wanted them in the past and you were working with them. Now you're only adding the Azure development part, which is the SDKs to it. And if you notice over here, you don't have a choice on which one of the Azure components you want or you don't want. If you want Azure development, you need all of these guys. So that's another thing to look at. So of course the .NET development itself is needed. Azure doesn't work with C++ as of now, but it will do very soon. But since I'm doing everything with C++, I'm going to add that. So Node.js, I'll take that too. The data storage and processing, why not? Data science and analytical applications, that's when you actually want to do more data science applications. Office SharePoint, I don't want to add it right now. Remember, you can add any of these guys in future if you want it. If you're into game development, that's the place to go through, and so on and so on. So at this point, I think we have chosen enough. The focus of this video is over this guy, which is the Azure development. And you can always see how much of your space is going to be occupied by Visual Studio. So I'll click install, and the installation process is going to start. Of course, I don't want to do a survey right now. And remember two things. First of all, you need to be connected to the internet because as you can see, all those components are being downloaded directly from internet and being installed onto your computer. And the second one is make sure your computer is not going to go to the hibernation during this process. This could be a time-consuming process. Right now, just to give you an idea of the speed you're getting, let's pull up the properties of this computer that we are working with so that you guys can see how this speed is coming up. So this is an Intel Core i7, 4 gigahertz with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and right now, considering that amount of power for installation, this is the speed of installation you're getting. So it's pretty time consuming. So I'll stop the video now and come back when all the installation is done. And finally, we're done. So it took almost about 15 minutes to finish this on the computer that I have here. It's asking us to restart. I always recommend you to restart because you don't want to get into different errors with Microsoft Visual Studio, as it is very sassy. And we're back from the restart, and now our Visual Studio is ready to go, and we are ready to get connected to our Microsoft Azure instance and work with it from our Visual Studio. So at this point, we are ready to start working with our Azure extensions on Visual Studio. So let's go to View and show the Server Explorer right from there. And looking at the Server Explorer, you're going to see this Azure tab right there on the top. If you collapse it, expand it, you're going to see that you have different services over here: app services, cloud services, data lake analysis, HD Insight, notification hub, SQL databases, storage, stream analysis jobs, and virtual machines, and so on. I'm pretty sure those of you who have watched the previous videos can now have a smile on, because these are all the resources that we already have gone through in the previous videos, and you see how easy is that to manage them from here. Of course, before you even start, you need to connect to your Microsoft Azure from this point. So right click and then connect to the Microsoft Azure subscription, which is going to bring up your signing in page. As you remember, we had an account over there that we used throughout these videos, which was my outlook.com email, and I just need to get connected over there. And now I'm connected to that account. As you can see, it's telling me I have 0 subscriptions, because you remember that we left that account, which was a free account, to be the way it was. That's why I see 0 subscriptions. It depends on how many subscriptions you have under that account, which are paid, and you can see them over there. So now from here, you can easily explore your app services, cloud services, and so on, so on, so on, the same way that you were looking at the resource manager group of your Microsoft Azure portal. So as you can see, that's pretty simple. You can use the Server Explorer in order to do the exact same job as a Cloud Explorer would do. And let's go up and show you how to open the Cloud Explorer. Basically, just come back here, click on the Cloud Explorer, and then you're going to have your Cloud Explorer opening up over here. Depending on what resources you have, you're going to have those resources over there. And when you click on those, what Microsoft Visual Studio does is it's going to bring in the interface for you down here, so you can basically work with it as you like. So as you can already see, Visual Studio contains 2 tools for managing Azure resources. One is the Cloud Explorer that you're looking at right now, and the other one is the Server Explorer that we looked at earlier today. So Cloud Explorer was introduced in Azure Sdk 2.7 and as the preferred tool for managing Azure resources based on Resource Manager model, while Server Explorer works with Azure Classic resources, but it does not work with all resources which are the resources generated under the resource manager base resource. To work with a specific resource, you can just simply select it from the list and move from there. So after you select it, an action tab will open up down here. You come down here and you can choose the appropriate action for that resource, or you can simply just look at the properties of that specific resource. Like if you go for storage accounts and everything, you're going to have different actions that you can actually do on those. Using Cloud Explorer and Server Explorer makes your life much easier than actually just going to the Azure portal every time. Remember, here you have your own file explorer that actually looks like a tree that you're very familiar with in your Windows Explorer or your Mac Explorer. And you can create resources over there, you can delete resources over there, you can edit resources over there, and all that. Let's take a look at how a new resource could be created from Visual Studio. So we go to the file and we click on the new and we go through new project. And from the new project dialog box, we basically can go and choose the cloud template. There you go. So it comes up, and as you can see over here, we have the cloud template. So if I click on the cloud template, now as you can see, I have different resources that could be created for the cloud, from Azure Cloud Services, Azure Functions, Service Fabric application, ASP.NET. As you remember, when I was installing the Azure instance in my Visual Studio, I chose for ASP.NET to be installed. And right now it's giving me the opportunity to use Visual C# in order to develop those resources. So we leave development out of this video as it is out of the scope of what we're talking about right now. So Visual Studio is an incredibly powerful tool for creating and managing solutions hosted in Azure. As great as it is, Visual Studio might not be the right tool for all scenarios. Instead, a scripting tool such as Windows PowerShell could be the right choice, which will be discussed in a different video. So that concludes our video over setting up and start using Microsoft Visual Studio for Azure management. And thank you for watching.